Executive Director of NORML, Alan St. Pierre. Give him a hand.
Like Paul and Steve, thank you very much for attending this conference. It's a given that the conference does not happen without the attendees and the sponsors. Unlike the DPA conference, which happens every couple of years, that is built into the DPA budget. And so therefore, that incredible 1,000-person conference is put on every year. The next one is in Denver. This is a different dynamic. If you don't come and put up the $150 or $200 to come, then we can't put on these events. And so that's the model. So if you enjoy these, you make them happen. And of course, specifically the staff, the planning committee, the board of directors that are involved. Orange County NORML has been incredibly helpful as a local chapter. We raise significant funds through the valuable art and ephemera that's been donated to the organization. My remarks to begin are just to walk us through what's going to be happening in the next couple of days and to put into context how important this conference is. For those of you who are keen on mobile devices, all of this is now updated. For those of us like myself who straddle such technologies, I really appreciate a piece of paper in my pocket regarding the schedule and what's happening, where do we meet. But all this stuff is now on a mobile web page, updated to the moment, and that information has been disseminated. As some have probably found out, as I think all of us will find out in the coming years, holding events like this where marijuana is the central topic is hard in a big corporate hotel. In a society that is not moving towards banning tobacco, but certainly moving towards a smoke-free environment to the extent it can be. So it's kind of a given at this point that these hotels do not host medication stations and vapor lounges. And of course, over the years, we've tried to make these things available. Our colleagues and friends at High Times and THC Expos and others acknowledge they're having the same difficulties trying to do these things in corporate hotels that don't allow any smoking, and they have these green accreditations that they're not willing to risk to allow us for 2 or 3 days to use cannabis here, so they lose their certification that they are a green hotel. So please, acknowledge that we probably still, while marijuana is illegal, need to be somewhat furtive, even if you're a medical patient, because vaporization no longer satisfies the contract that we're not smoking in the facility. And we're all on one floor. Unlike the DPA conference and some other NORML conferences at these big corporate hotels, all events are on this one floor. We can only get so lost on this one floor between all the different events that are save for tonight. Tonight on the 3rd floor, outside on the California Plaza, the awards should be a wonderful night outside, which gives us some ability to enjoy ourselves, and that will be the only event held outside of this floor. And the area is really unique to take in. Take this little trolley car down to the Grand Central Market and take lunch. And if you want to see something even more unique and malodorous, you can go about a mile further, maybe half a mile down to one of the largest stretches of wholesale paraphernalia distribution I think I've ever seen in my life. Walk in there and say, "Can I get one?" They say, 1,000? Just one pipe? You wonder, where does it all come from? Well, it comes from about half a mile down the road from here. And of course, we're clustered in the middle of LA's emerging cultural scene with museums and whatnot. It's an all-inclusive event, save for the NWA, the NORML Women's Alliance Luncheon, and the Saturday night benefit, which blessedly Richard Davis and his wife have opened up their home and hemp museum on Saturday night. There's only 100 tickets available, so it will go very quickly. So I suggest if you haven't signed up, please do so. The High Times Awards tonight, we honor the activists, of course. A great ephemera. We have the original 1976 High Times cover with Bob Marley with a big pile of what I presume was great Jamaican lamb's breath or something close to that. The original Doonesbury, who Gary always donates his wonderful artwork. Great paraphernalia and ephemera. Paul Kuhn has donated his wonderful house in southern France, which is very popular for some strange reason. The theme, yes, the final days of Prohibition. I hope it doesn't sound like it's whistling by the graveyard, because I've tried to warn against that. But the data is clear that we are a society moving towards legalization. We're moving away from prohibition in so many measurable ways. Of course, we have 3 legalization initiatives in Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. All are viable. Frankly, I think Washington and Colorado native son of Massachusetts, I think it's a given that Massachusetts is going to vote for medical marijuana. I think the only question is, are they going to vote for it at a higher percentage than they did to decriminalize marijuana 4 years ago, which was 65%. Then we have the Bible Belt, Arkansas. The first chance ever to see when an individual in Arkansas, or in the Bible Belt, shall we say, goes into that voting booth, in the privacy of that booth, pushes a lever, pulls a button, whatever you do there, and we'll see. We'll see what happens in Arkansas. Legalization in Washington and Oregon and in Colorado, there's something perverse in me that wants to see it happen in Arkansas regarding And then of course Montana. I could get up here and talk an hour about what's been going on in Montana, but Montana has the opportunity to check its legislature to at least go back to the status quo of reasonable medical marijuana laws. Public opinion is all moving in the direction of reform. Again, Paul alluded to the 50% in Gallup. Other polls at state levels are even higher. Nate Silver has a prediction up at the New York Times that we're going to hit the 60 percentile in the next 10 years. So we'll be having more NORML conferences, but the topics are getting more and more like what I think we're having today, which is, what will legalization look like? How can we have that in a responsible society, in a free market society? And then, of course, more elites, more commissions. This is a lot driven by Ethan Nadelman's great work at the Drug Policy Alliance by getting Richard Branson and so many others to now start to pull together commissions. We have almost all the major leaders sitting and former presidential leaders of South and Central America. Uruguay is about to legalize marijuana, about to become the first country to potentially go over that Rubicon to tell the UN, no, we will have a controlled market here in Uruguay. And so this is fascinating. We're all living through this period right now. And finally, cannabis caucuses in our Congresses and in our state houses. There is a viable number of people who are elected today that we help get elected, we help fund them, we now have those relationships with them. There are at least, by my count, 15 to 20 in Congress who are genuine supporters of ending the prohibition of marijuana. Most of them are Democrats. The Republicans are certainly libertarian leaning. We certainly have to see those numbers go up, but that has finally happened. And then in the states where really all the action happens. Some probably read this year that a number of governors have been calling Ethan and myself, and I presume Rob Campia and folks at the ACLU. This is what we have worked so hard to get to, the point where these sitting governors and senators and representatives call us and say, we want your support, we want your endorsement, and we want your money. And that is exactly what I think all of us have worked to get to that point, and we are there. I expect the NORML PAC and the MPP PAC will be very, very busy in these next 2 years as we fund these politicians into ascendancy, and we have to be with them all of the way. From the time they stick that hand up at the city council meeting and go to be a congressperson, to go to be a senator, we have to be with them all of the way. Most notably, and it does feel like legalized bribery, you have to be there with your funding. It's a clear quid pro quo. The highlights. Our next speaker is Tom Hayden, a former assembly person, a legend in counterculture and American politics. So we're blessed to have Tom here today. I'm moderating the next 2 panels that look at this 75-year epoch. And it is an epoch. It's going to end. Some of us won't live long enough to see it, but it will end. And we will look back on this period of time. People will write about the things that we've done at these conferences. I know that because most of these conferences, and so much, thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages and emails have been donated to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst as a permanent archive. They've achieved my archives, alumni, they've got Keith Stropp's, they've achieved Lester Grinspoon's archives, and we expect others. And we think this is going to be the repository of the information of how did marijuana become legalized in America and around the world. Then the next panel is on what will marijuana legalization look like, and taxation. Great topical afternoon panels, but the one that stands out in my mind, the one that the staff has wanted to do for a couple of years, is the idea of what happened to hemp? Those of us who have been involved with this for 20 years, particularly longer, remember a time when hemp would save the world. And I still go into the NORML basement in the archives, and we have a big poster that Jack Herrera created in the early 1990s. Hemp will save the world. And at one level, of course, I feel that. At the other level, I chuckle. I chuckle at 20 years later that the idea that hemp was supposed to save the world. That seems rather monolithic, to say the least. There was Richard Lee's Hemp Magazine, Mary Kane's tremendous Hemp World. High Times Magazine even put out a Hemp Times edition for a number of years. I used to take calls from Ralph Lauren. The secretary said, "Oh, Ralph Lauren's on the phone." Calvin Klein. Where could I get some hemp? Tomorrow we have, I think the most important aspect of tomorrow is our keynote address. We are in Hollywood. I acknowledge a failure of getting a celebrity, if you will, a Hollywood celebrity. Oliver Stone had agreed to speak, but in his respect, duty called. And in duty calling, Keith Stropp stepped up and agreed to do the keynote. Keith has his autobiography finally coming out this year. And along with an introduction from Rick Steves, who in my mind is one of the most amazing cannabis advocates who have ever come out of this movement, in the sense of he is so mainstream, so earnest, but unlike so many other folks who fund marijuana law reform, and for all intents and purposes, ladies and gentlemen, there's only about 5 to 7 people who have ever put up the significant money to advance marijuana law reform. In fact, really only 2 people are responsible for about 95% of it. That would be Peter Lewis and George Soros. But Rick not only has lent his fame and his reputation to this, but he has put up significant amounts of his own money. A very rare thing when an advocate can step in and say, I will put my skin in the game too. And so we're blessed to have Rick here and to be on that keynote panel. But I'm really looking forward to hearing Keith's, someone will appreciate this comparison, a Reader's Digest version of his autobiography, because all of us are in this room today because of one person who got marijuana law reform off the ground in 1970. The Pot and Politics panel is exclusively on initiatives, because initiatives are really where it's at. We have the principals from the initiative here today, blessedly, to talk about it. Again, I'm from New England, so I'm really proud to say that New England is finally challenging the West for reform. Almost all the New England states, and I include New York in that as well, is moving towards reform. Obama's broken promises. I mean, some of the victims of that, the crossfire victims, are right here in this room. So we have a lot to talk about what's happened regarding the broken promise of Obama. Our breakout sessions are very informative. You never know which one to go to. Saturday, the NWA luncheon, again, it's a ticketed event. The fastest growing segment of NORML is the NORML Women's Alliance. For the last 3 years, this group, chestnut red to gray here, I've been arguing that we need to be more diverse, less male, more women, greater diversity, and it's happening more and more, and the NWA has really led that, and it's a blessed thing. We're looking at the changing face of medical marijuana, who's using it, why they're using it. Reason Foundation has a wonderful film tomorrow by Paul Fine. We all get to preview, called America's Longest Drug War, America's Longest War. Some of us in the office have seen it. I have to turn away at times. It was so frightening. Paul's allusion to what happens in Mexico is so frightening. And the first-hand reportage that Reason has helped fund, we will be the first to see it, and we're blessed to do that as well. And then I've taken the director's prerogative to end the conference and to give my remarks about what is so fascinating about where we're at regarding medical cannabis, legalization, and to try to respectfully tie this all up in a way that when we leave here Saturday, we leave, as we always do, committed, interlocked, with great fidelity and sorority and fraternity, and to recognize that we are on the cusp of reform in ways that those who have been at this, who are shoulders we are standing upon, the men at this table, Keith, many of the, and I say men, because we're only now at the point where women are going to be taking these leadership roles. And so in the coming years, these will be the changing faces of the time to reflect who uses cannabis in America. So thank you very much for your patience and your forbearance and your support, and welcome to the 41st Annual NORML Conference.